nothing. I can't believe it. But what do you want in life? Still nothing. Well, I'll give you the benediction then and you can go home. But I'm sure that you want a lot more than what you're telling me. But the thoughts for this message came, I met a man during the week and we had a conversation for about 40 minutes or so before we were interrupted. And I hadn't seen him for a long time. But we were discussing life and where he was and what was happening and where he was at. And he made this statement as he left. He says, I'm half a Christian and I'm trying to find my way and purpose in life. One day I hope to be a full Christian. I thought, wow, is that possible? Can you be half a Christian? You see, you can't be half a Christian. You're either a Christian or you're not. It's as simple as that. The Bible makes it plain. You're either a Christian or you're not. And there's no in between. And as I've been thinking about the discussion that I had with this man, and he's in probably his early 50s, he's done a lot in life, and I thought about the book of Ecclesiastes and some of the issues that we discussed. Now, Solomon, the wisest man in the world, wrote the book of Ecclesiastes, and he did so, I believe, in the middle of his life. And it was during that time that he was experiencing the pressures of being king. You know, being a king, as King Charles III is going to find out, the pressures are going to build and build and build with the things he has to do. Along with the pressures of moral responsibility, they all came at a cost and were taking a toll in his life. But as a person, he's got it all. He's got all the money, all the fame, all the power, all the women, all the success, and he's still not satisfied. He has everything. He's at a crisis point, and he wonders whether life is worth it. Why am I here? What is the real meaning of life? And he begins to investigate and experience life and all it has to offer. And he comes to the conclusion that without God, there is nothing. When God is removed from everything, there is no purpose, there is no meaning. And you might say, yes, I've heard all this before. Well, be patient. You're going to hear it again. His identity is stated in verse 1. These are the words of the teacher, a son of David, king in Jerusalem. And so we know from our text the following things. Well, maybe it's going to work and maybe it's not. We see his position, the words of the preacher and teacher. How old do you think Solomon was when he became king? Put your hand up if you're 18 years of age today. How would you like the position of king? No? You've got everything you could ever think about at the age of 18. You are the king. And we're told that the people's response was in this. When David was close to death, he told Solomon his son, I'm about to die. Be strong, become a man. Do the job the Lord your God has assigned you by following his instructions and obeying his rules, commandments, regulations, and laws as written in the law of Moses. Then you'll succeed in all you do and seek to accomplish, and the Lord will fulfill his promise to me. If your descendants watch their step, live faithfully in my presence with all their heart and being, then he promised you'll not fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. Solomon sat on his father's, David's throne, and his royal authority was firmly solidified. So that's where we get it from. And the people in 1 Chronicles has this to say about his reign. Solomon sat on the Lord's throne as king in place of his father David. He was successful, and all Israel was loyal to him. All the officers and warriors, as well as all of King David's sons, pledged their allegiance to King Solomon. The Lord greatly magnified Solomon before all Israel and bestowed on him greater majesty than any king of Israel before him. So what a position he's got. And he started off well. He was told what to do, the instructions. Follow the Lord's instructions and you'll be successful. Now his pedigree, we're told he was the son of David and Bathsheba. He was the son of a king. We're told his power. He was king in Jerusalem. He was the most powerful man, if you like, in the world. And he was God's man ruling as king of God's people. Now, many will say that the book of Ecclesiastes is written to unbelievers. But I think it's written to believers. And it has great value to us as we follow the Lord Jesus. He's referred to as the preacher. And as a preacher, he gathers together an assembly. He gathers together people of faith, and he presents them with a message from God. And the book of Ecclesiastes, is his message to the people, God's own people, about what God has to say. And we gain value when we study the book of Ecclesiastes. I have so many people say, Pastor, the Old Testament is so hard, I don't understand it, I don't want to read it. Well, we miss out on so much. Get a modern version and it comes alive for you. But Ecclesiastes is a book that we should study because Solomon tried and experienced everything. And I don't mean just some things. He experienced everything that life had to offer. And yet, he was not satisfied. Not satisfied. As one commentator says, in summary, everything is meaningless because everyone dies. And it's a message that comes through this book over and over again. It's, when you read it, you think, oh, doom and gloom. Hasn't he got anything good to say? But you know, death in Ecclesiastes, when we come to it, it's a pin, if you like, that bursts every bubble that we use to shield ourselves from the truth. That death does come to everyone. It doesn't matter whether you're young, it doesn't matter whether you're old or in between. Death is a possibility that all of us could face. Think of work or money or pleasure as balloons. We fill them with our time, our energy, and our hope. For a while, we watch them expand. From the outside, they look to gain mass, and you might even assume weight. But inside, it's only a vapor. And death is the needle that bursts that bubble of everything that we gather together in life. Because when we're dead, we can't take any of these things with us. They stay here. Now, it's a sobering perspective, Ecclesiastes, because many people today are dissatisfied with what they've got. They want more and more. They want more and more. I want to be comfortable. I want to be happy. Well, how do you define happiness and how do you find comfortable? They believe the key to their happiness lies in reaching the goals they've set for themselves, whatever they might be. In other words, people keep blowing more and more air into those balloons that they're chasing. The problem isn't what we haven't achieved. It isn't that we haven't arrived. The problem is where we're going. Where we're going. And the preacher was a wise man who enjoyed the benefits of wisdom. The book of Proverbs teaches us to expect and then some. But as the preacher, he's had everything he wanted. And he's no longer wondering how to make the most out of his life. He's at the point in his life where he's saying, what's the point? I've tried everything, and I just don't understand. It doesn't add any meaning. What have I gained? I've got all the benefits of my wisdom, but what point is it if I end up being dead? What does it even mean to live a good life? And that's a challenging question, because many people are asking, what's the point of life? What do I hope to achieve? And hence my title, what do you want from life? What do you want in life? Now Solomon, he summarizes the issue. The teacher says useless, useless, completely useless, everything is useless. Now what a wonderful statement. Everything is useless. Everything is meaningless. And he's asking, what's the point of life? It's useless. It's empty. A man who has everything. This is a man who says wisdom is useless. This is a man who says pleasure and materialism are useless. This is a man who says work is useless. This is a man who says self-improvement and advancement. It's useless. It doesn't make sense. It's a waste of time. And I wonder how many people sitting in this auditorium feel the same way or have thought about this. How many Christians have felt this way? And you might say, oh, Pastor, I've never thought that way. Well, I wonder, have you felt that way? This is what happens, I believe, when a society believes there is no place for God. This is a place in society where Christians say, God, I'm too busy for you. I'll fit you in when I've got time. This is a time when people abandon God and pursue their own agenda to find happiness and purpose and meaning in their life their own way. God is removed. As one commentator says, if we don't believe there's a God, then you believe that you're here by accident. That millions and millions of years ago, something happened. Some collision in a void darkness, and in that collision, humanity began to develop and grow. I wonder what he's talking about. We would call it the theory of evolution today. And we have subsequently evolved into the types of people we are today, and with the minds we have, with the way that we can think and act and reproduce. If this is what you believe in, then there are some logical consequences to this. If there is no God, there is no reason to live, and there can be no moral standards, values, or right and wrong. In other words, without God, life is meaningless. And anything I try to do in this life is meaningless because there's no purpose to it. Essentially what you're doing is wasting your time completely because there is no God, no purpose to exploring these things. Now the alternative to this type of thinking is that there is a God. There is a God who created you and everything we see. He created it with a design, and most of all, He created it with a purpose. And the Bible tells us God did create this world and everything in it. And everything in this world has a purpose. It has a function. That means there's a purpose to your life. There's a purpose to my life. And it means we've got two options. We either can pursue this purpose or ignore it. That's the only two options that we do have. But I think Solomon goes a little deeper than just scratching the surface of life being meaningless, because it goes beyond the daily grind of life as we know it. And it tells us a little bit about our human condition. And every human being, what do we want? What do you want in this life? What do you want from society? What do you want to be remembered for? Now, for example, yesterday, what do we hear about that hit most of our social media outlets? Queen Elizabeth II is dead. And what did most TV outlets present? Her life. And what is she remembered by as being? She's no longer with us anymore. The longest reigning monarch. What is she remembered for? See, Karen watched most of the narration. But you get the point. What was the significance of her life? What is her legacy that she's left? When you and I die, do we leave a legacy? Do we want a legacy? Do we want to be remembered for what? Your work? The things you've achieved? We all want some sort of significance. We all want to believe that we can make a difference and we leave a legacy. And James says this. Some of you say, today or tomorrow, we'll go to the city, to some city. We'll stay there a year, do business, make money. But you do not know what will happen tomorrow. Your life is like a mist. You can see it for a short time, but then it goes away. So you should say, if the Lord wants, we will live and do this or that. But now you are proud and you brag. All this bragging is wrong. Anyone knows the right thing to do but does not do it is sinning. Our life, the things that we do, our legacy is beyond us. Our life is like a mist. And the writer is saying, we come and we go. You and I, here today, gone tomorrow. What difference does it make in this place called Darwin? Will they miss us? Maybe initially, but over the years, will they even remember us? Now, I know that many people are caught up in the AFL and the Rugby League Grand Finals, but let me ask you, if you're passionate about your sport, tell me this, who won the premiership 10 years ago? And by what score? "10 years ago. We were there. We saw it. Probably participated in it. But we got very few recollections about it. And that's the same with our life. Here today and gone tomorrow. Solomon asks, what's the point if we're like a mist that we come and go? The universe still remains the same. It still functions without us. It still does everything that it normally does. The only difference is we're not here anymore. And he says, what's the point? In wanting significance in his life, it's useless, it's empty. So how do we view this world? How do we view this life? How do we see things? What do we want? Now, our worldview is affected and it's influenced by other people. And it's influenced by the environment we grow up. It's influenced by your education. All of these things influence you, the way in which you look at things in the world. You look at things differently. Now, I grew up in Sydney, in the western suburbs. It was called Fibro City. My perspective on life was very different from someone growing up on the North Shore. Very different. All the factors, the environment, the education affects the way that I look at things in the world. And all of these things affect the way that I look at my world and where I fit into it. And Ecclesiastes when you read it, is a ruthless examination of our worldviews. Because as Christians, you and I are not immune from doubts and frustrations. We're not immune from crisis situations that disturb our thinking. And we often might ask ourselves, who am I and why am I here? We might ask ourselves, is this all there is to life? I can be disappointed. I can be disenchanted with everyday familiarity and the stability of life around me. In fact, I might want more. I might think that I deserve more. And those challenges can be about work, whether I want to go to work or not. It can challenge my marriage relationship. It can challenge every marriage relationship. Where have I become indifferent to my wife or husband? Is there any love that's still there? Is it going through the motions? And I can begin to think to myself, I deserve better. I want better. I want happiness. I just want that happiness. And it's not too much to ask. I want a house. I want a well-paying job. I want to have time to do what I want. I want money in the bank. I want kids. I want to have the opportunity to succeed. I want me time. We never think those sorts of things as Christians, do we? They never, ever, ever cross our minds, do they? But we need to ask ourselves, have I become selfish? Have I become sick and tired of doing things for other people? Am I thinking about the cost involved in doing these things? Do I think I'll be better off not doing them anymore? I could save some money and achieve what I want. I'm tired with life. I work hard. I never seem to get anywhere. I'm forever paying bills. I never get me time. My marriage has deteriorated. There's no sexual intimacy. There's no communication. We're going in opposite directions. There is nothing. I want out. I want something better. I deserve better. I'm fed up with being a doormat that everyone walks all over. I'm sick and tired of being taken for granted. I wash, I cook, I clean. I do not like being used and abused. Now, do we ever have those thoughts as Christians? You better believe we do, if we're honest. That's a worldview. It means we think we're entitled. We want better. And what's the point? We work, we do all these things, and where does it get us? And we could say, oh, Pastor, I know I should be reading my Bible. If I'm a husband, I should be taking leadership of my family. But you know what? I'm too busy and I'm too tired. I've really got no time for the Lord in my busy schedule and the things I must achieve. I believe this message speaks loud and clear to every one of us. If there's no time for the Lord, if we're too busy to make time, then everything we do will seem empty and useless. And that's the reality check for each one of us before it's too late, before we self-destruct. We have become selfish. And our worldview is taken from somewhere else. God is pushed out. And so we need to fill that with something else. And the world is doing a good job. This is why Solomon says, I can't understand it. Now, Solomon was the wisest man in the world. But you know what? His problem was that he allowed the women in his life to turn him away from the Lord. Now, the wisest man in the world had that many wives and concubines. The Bible tells us he had 1,000 of them. Now, he was a man that pushed God aside. He started out so well, but he allowed God to be pushed out of the picture. But he gave some instructive suggestions. And there's those instructive suggestions that we have. He says in verses 3 to 7, nothing changes. What do people really gain from all the hard work they do here on earth? People live, people die, but the earth continues forever. The sun rises, the sun sets, and then it hurries back to where it rises again. The wind blows to the south, it blows to the north, it blows from one direction, then another. Then it turns around and repeats the same pattern, going nowhere. And the rivers flow to the sea, but the sea never becomes full. He's thinking about life in general in this chapter. He uses the term under the sun. And what that reference is to everybody who is living and working in this life. They're under the sun. We have it here in Darwin. We get up, the sun's there. What do? Work. We do everything under the sun. He's speaking about us. He's speaking about life. And he asks the question, why do we do what we do? Now maybe you can tell me, why do we work all our life? What's the point in working all our lives? Maybe you don't want to work all your life. What do you want to do? Retire. Live it up. But it's still work. He's asking, what is the point? Now, why do we work? Tell me that. Why do we work? Where did the idea come that as human beings we should work come from? You see, the Bible sheds light on why we should work. And it goes back to Genesis chapter 1 through 3, where God intended that mankind would work before and after the fall of man in the Garden of Eden. It was God's intention that we work. And let's face it, all of us will do all sorts of work in our lifetime. There are many things that we'll learn. There's many jobs that we will do. And we'll study. We'll work with our hands. We'll solve problems. We'll work on relationships. But you know what? Our whole life is filled with work. So the question Solomon asks is, why do we do it? You might say, well, we work so that we can eat. Well, Solomon's answer to you is, it's not good enough. I want to do more than just exist. I want to do more than just live to eat. He says, I'm not interested in working my whole life so that I can die from some other cause. In other words, he's saying, what's in life for me? What do I get out of it? There's got to be something more to this life than simply staying alive and reproducing. Are we any better than animals? Now, if we believed evolution, we're no better than animals. And he's asking the question. Now, you've probably heard the term rat race. Are we part of the rat race? Who believes in a rat race? You put your hand up if you are in part of the rat race. Explain to me what the rat race is. Yeah, well, it comes from a lab experiment. This idea of the rat race. It's an endless, self-defeating, pointless pursuit of an exhausting, repetitive lifestyle that leaves no time for enjoyment or relaxation. And the picture is of a rat going round on a circle. That's all it does. And it just keeps going and going and going and going, and it never changes. And what Solomon is saying here is he felt the whole universe and everything was trapped in a rat race. In other words, it's characterized by endless motion. Generations come, generations go. The sun rises, the sun sets. The wind whirls about continually. The rivers pour constantly into the seas. And yet, for all that motion, nothing is ever accomplished. The earth still remains the same. The sun and wind never really arrive anywhere. They just keep going around in circles. And although the rivers constantly dump water into the seas are never filled. Solomon says, I can't understand it. What's the point of it? You see, he looks at the world and he sees it as it really is. And he's asking us this morning to see the world as it really is. He doesn't despair at the state of the world. He recognizes the hand of God at work in all of this. And he returns again to the truth that God is at work in creation, upholding and sustaining it. But he leaves that to the end of chapter 12 to tell us about that. And the Apostle Paul said much the same. In Romans 8:20-25, everything God made was changed. You notice what it says? Now, this is a modern translation, but the Greek brings out the idea, changed to become useless, not by its own wish, but because God wanted it, and because all along there was this hope that everything God made would be set free from ruin to have the freedom and glory that belong to God's children. We know that everything God made has been waiting until now in pain, like a woman ready to give birth. Not only the world, but we also have been waiting with pain inside us. We have the Spirit as the first part of God's promise. So we're waiting for God to finish making us his own children, which means our bodies will be made free. We were saved and we have this hope. If we see what we're waiting for, that is not really hope. People do not hope for something they already have. We're hoping for something we do not have yet, and we're waiting for it patiently. In other words, we live in a fallen world. This world and the people in it are fallen. We're not perfect. Now, I could be wrong here. There might be someone that says, I am perfect. If you are, please stand up. I'd like to meet you. Because none of us are perfect. We are flawed. Every one of us. And so is the earth in which we live. But you know what? Both the world and we as Christians are waiting for that time where we'll be transformed and changed. We will be perfect. Now that's our hope. And it's a hope that rests on the Word of God. God said it and it's going to happen. And we're waiting for it. We really are waiting for it. But we should be looking and understanding why our world is the way that it is and why people are. Now, verse 8. Oh, isn't that lovely? You feel hungry? Hey? You feel hungry? Well, notice what the verse says. Everything is boring, so boring that you don't even want to talk about it. Words come again and again to our ears, but we never hear enough, nor can we ever really see all we want to see. What is Solomon actually saying here? He's saying nothing ever satisfies for very long. Nothing ever satisfies. He comes to the conclusion, life is boring. It's monotonous. Now tell me, what are you going to do tomorrow? I should rephrase that. What do you hope to do tomorrow? What's your life going to consist of? You're going to go to bed tonight, aren't you? You're going to sleep. And you're going to wake up, and guess what? The sun's there. Maybe you'll need waking up by your alarm. You will get up, and what will you do? You'll take care of the personal stuff first, won't you? You'll take care of that first. Then you get yourself dressed. And if you're industrious, you make your bed, clean your room. You go out and have breakfast. And then what will you do? Either off to school or off to work. You'll come home, and what will you do? Oh, that's marvelous. I'm sure that you'll eat, you'll relax, you might do some watering, you might do some other things about the place, but then you know what? You'll have a shower and you'll go to bed. And the next day, what will you do? And the day after? And the day after? And the day after? How boring, how monotonous is that? And that's what Solomon is saying. Nothing changes. It's all the same. And whatever you do is not enough to satisfy, if you like, the itch that you have, because you don't want to do the same things again and again. There's an itch there. And Solomon says, look, I've pursued about everything in this world that it has to offer. And I can tell you, he says this morning, there is nothing that completely satisfies you. But I do know this, in trying it out, it wore me out trying to find a way to be satisfied. You get worn out just trying to find another reason, something that will satisfy you, because it doesn't satisfy you for very long. Now, there's a big difference between anticipation and fulfillment. We crave something, we go after it, anticipating happiness that it will give us what we want when we get it. When we get what we want, initially there's joy. Oh, there's a sense of happiness. I've got it. But that soon fades into disappointment and frustration. And we begin to crave something more and more, something better. Now, when we get hungry, what do we eat? Food. And are you satisfied when you've eaten? Well, why do you get hungry again? And you get hungry again. Now, you can blame it on the body, but you get hungry. You're not satisfied. If I bought pizza in here right now, and I fed you all, in a couple of hours you'd be hungry again for something else. You'd be craving something else. So you're not satisfied. We're not satisfied. And the same thing happens when we get thirsty. We drink, fine. A little later, I'm thirsty again. I'm thirsty. We drink. And the same thing happens when it comes to such things as money, as fame, and fortune, and even sex. Nothing completely satisfies. And that's what Solomon says. There is nothing that completely satisfies an individual. The more we want, the more we want more. And very few people say, hey, look, I'm happy with everything I have. I don't want anything more. You see, the search for satisfaction continues on, and it will continue on. And it becomes frustrating. You know why? We don't know what we're looking for. We don't know what will satisfy us. Now, in our text, he said, our eyes are never satisfied with seeing. Now, if I see a beautiful car, I've got to have that. I buy it. You know what? 4 or 5 years later, oh, there's a better car over there. I better go get it. We see with our eyes. We're never satisfied. There's always something better, something more that we want. And our ears are never satisfied with hearing. We hear about something else. Somebody heard this. Somebody heard this is a better way to make money. This is something else we could do. And so we're continually looking for things that will satisfy us. We're doing more things. And yet the truth is, our work is pointless. It never finishes because we're never satisfied. As someone said, we're like hamsters on a wheel that constantly going around for no purpose. Now, you've probably never looked at yourself as a hamster going around in a wheel and asking, what am I doing this for? Well, that's what Solomon is asking us for. He says, there is nothing in this life that completely satisfies an individual. Then he says, nothing new under the sun in these verses. All things continue the way they have been since the beginning. What has happened will happen again. There's nothing new here on earth. Someone might say, look, this is new. But really it has always been there. It was there, here before we were. People don't remember what happened long ago. And in the future, people will not remember what happens now. Even later, other people will not remember what was done before them. So what Solomon is saying, there is nothing new under the sun. Is he saying there's no new discoveries? Is he saying there's no new inventions? that all human exploration is useless? I don't believe that's what he's saying. He's looking from man's perspective and suggesting that God cannot do something new. In fact, he says in Ecclesiastes 3:14 and 15, God is able to do whatever he wants. I know that everything God does will continue forever. People cannot add anything to what God has done. They cannot take away from it. God does it this way to make people respect him. What happens now has happened in the past. What will happen in the future has happened before. God makes the same things happen again and again. He's come to that conclusion. God is sovereign over all his creation. And it's impossible to change everything that he set in place. Now that might be news to the climate changes. There's only one person who controls the climate, and that's God. He sets things in order the way they should be. His purposes and plans cannot be changed. They cannot be frustrated by mankind. The thing that remains unchanged then is who or what? God remains unchanged. The universe continues the way it always has. The sun goes up, the sun goes down. Who remains unchanged? God remains unchanged. But who needs to be changed? You and I. That's the message. We need to be changed. People will always be selfish. People will always be greedy, cruel, lustful, and self-interested people. Our nature and desires remain the same. And Solomon's saying there's nothing new about that. You know, our desires and our appetites and our nature is what needs to be changed. Until it's changed, it's going to remain the same. We constantly crave originality. We want the new. And we see this in our society. We want the latest, the shiniest, the best things that are available. And Solomon says, you know what? It's all useless. There'll be always something better that comes along. He says our lives are but a vapor, a mist, fleeting, transitory, unsubstantial. And so too is your name and my name. You and I will leave this world, and eventually our lives, our reputation, our fame, our legacy will vanish just as those who have gone before us. Just before those who have gone before us. Solomon concludes that human endeavour, human ambition, our need for satisfaction, and creation itself is subject to futility or meaningless. It's vanity. We are fallen people living in a fallen world, and Solomon wants us to understand this. The question remains, though, how should we respond in light of this truth? If I've read this book of Solomon right now, and you've been listening to me for a while, are you full of despair and think, wow, this is not a sermon I want to hear? Give me something good. Give me something good. Well, I've been giving you something good, but I haven't finished yet. There is hope. And that's what Solomon really wants us to understand, because he makes us wait until the end of his book before he gives us the conclusion. And his conclusion is this. Well, it would be. Now, everything has been heard, so I give my final advice. Honour God, honour his commands, because this is all people must do. Now, looking at Solomon this morning, what can I take away from Solomon? Well, all I can say is his views are rather selfish. Very selfish, rather than social. He has lived to get instead of giving. He has found what all people who do such things find, that the more one lives for self, the less that earthly things satisfy them. You can have it all, but they'll never satisfy you. That's what Solomon found. He was selfish. He did it for himself. Now, most people, when they build a house, how long does it take you to build a house? A couple of days? Goodness, where's your builder? You know, we go 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years if we're pushed. You know how long it took Solomon to get it just right? 13 years. And he's the wisest man in the world. But what a house. He spent it all on that, on himself. And the more that you spend on yourself, you'll never find the satisfaction. When one lives to get, the more one gets, the less a person really has. It really does. Now, Solomon was a great social mixer, but that was on the outward appearance, but inwardly he was an isolationist. He'd been wrapped up in his own selfishness, viewing all others simply in relationship to his own self-gratification. In other words, he looked, what can I get from this person and this person? Solomon views life apart from God rather than being controlled by him. As you read the book of Ecclesiastes, the name of God is scarcely mentioned, and then even only distantly. All and everything from Solomon's perspective is it seems to be in the hands of men. And one of the main reasons for the pessimism about human life and history, which is happening in our times, is that we reach a place where God is pushed further and further away from our lives in order to fade into oblivion and be replaced by our gods, the gods that we choose, the gods that we want to follow, the gods that we can manipulate, the gods who will give us what we want. And this is what is happening in our society today. Where is God? As a Christian, where is God in our life, and what does he matter? We give token service on a Sunday. We're here. We're praising God. But what about the rest of the week? What part does God play in our relationship? As I asked this morning, what do you want from life? What do you want? Are you content? Are you satisfied? And you look at things as being given to you as a gift from God to be used while you're here? Do you enjoy them as a gift from God? Or are you dissatisfied and you want more and more than what you have? That you're not satisfied with your lot in life, that you believe you deserve better than what you've got. Now, this all started from a conversation with a man. But the challenges are that I believe every Christian it speaks to this morning. Are we satisfied with God? Is God enough for me in this world, in this life? Is he all? Does he satisfy? Is he contented? You know, I can sing the songs with the best of them. But is the reality, is my God enough for me? Does he truly satisfy? Or am I looking elsewhere to find that satisfaction? Solomon did, and he had the means. And he came up and said, it's all useless. It's all meaningless unless God is part of our lives. The challenge for you and me as Christians this morning is make God part of our life. Make sure he's the priority in our life to lead and guide our paths. And that's the challenge. Are you ready to continue on with Ecclesiastes, or have you had enough? We've only done the first 11 verses. And if you're disappointed and frustrated, then don't read any more. But it's a challenging book. It challenges
our worldview. It challenges us what we think. And it asks the questions,